December 20th, 1943. Over the frozen spine of northern Germany, 25,000 feet above Bremen. The sky is a hard metallic blue, too clean for what's about to happen. Frost rims the plexiglass nose of a Boeing B-17F Flying Fortress as it lumbers forward in tight formation. Inside the bomber, the air smells of oil, sweat, and heated oxygen. Engines drone at a constant, chest-rattling pitch. The crew has been airborne for hours, and every man aboard knows this stretch of sky. It is where formations fracture. It is where men die. Second Lieutenant Charles Brown, 22 years old, sits in the left seat of B-17F Ye Old Pub, tail number 423167. It's his first combat mission as aircraft commander. His gloves are stiff with cold. His jaw is clenched so tight it aches. Ahead, flak blooms like black iron flowers, sudden, violent, perfectly timed. The first explosion lifts the bomber as if struck by a giant hand. The second rips through the formation. Shrapnel hammers the fuselage, tearing aluminum like paper. The intercom erupts with overlapping shouts. "Flak! Heavy flak! 12 o'clock! High!" Brown holds course. He has to. Breaking formation means isolation, and isolation means death. A third burst detonates close enough to punch holes clean through the nose. Plexiglass disintegrates. Freezing wind slams into the cockpit. Blood sprays across the instrument panel as Sergeant Alex Sandy Yuknes, the co-pilot, slumps forward, wounded. Brown grabs the yoke with numbing fingers, fighting the sudden pull as the bomber drops out of formation. Below them, Germany waits. The fortress falls behind, its place in the sky suddenly empty. Other bombers close ranks, sealing the gap. No one looks back. They can't afford to. Now the fighters come. From the sun, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and FW-190s dive like hawks. Cannon fire rakes the bomber's belly. The left engine coughs, then roars back unevenly. The nose gunner, Sergeant Maynard Snuffy Smith, fires until his guns jam, then keeps firing anyway, pulling the triggers again and again, as if force of will might fix broken metal. Another pass. The chin turret goes silent. The ball turret stops responding. Oxygen lines rupture, turning the air thin and sharp. At the tail, Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode screams as rounds tear through the rear section. The radio crackles once, then dies. Inside Ye Old Pub, the crew is bleeding, freezing, and running out of ammunition. Brown tries to maintain altitude, but the bomber is dying. Control cables are shot through. The rudder barely responds. The airspeed bleeds away. A fighter streaks past the cockpit, so close Brown sees the pilot's goggles. This is it, he thinks. This is where we go down. Miles away, at Fliegerhorst-Jever, a German fighter pilot pulls on his flight gear. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, 27 years old, veteran of North Africa, recipient of the Knight's Cross. He has 27 confirmed kills. One more, and he will qualify for a higher decoration. He has already buried friends this war has taken from him. The scramble siren wails. Stigler runs for his Bf-109 G6, heart steady, movements practiced. As the engine catches and the aircraft surges down the runway, he hears his former commander's voice in his head, Gustav Rödel, words drilled into him after witnessing atrocities early in the war. "If I ever see you shoot a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself." Stigler climbs hard, banking toward the distant thunder of combat. The radio chatters with reports of a crippled American bomber falling behind the formation. Easy prey, a mercy kill. He breaks through a veil of cloud and sees it. The B-17 hangs in the air like a wounded animal, tail shredded, guns dangling uselessly, holes punched clean through its wings. One engine is barely turning. The cockpit glass is gone. Men are visible inside, exposed to the open sky. Stigler slides into position off the bomber's wing, finger tightening on the trigger. At this range, one burst would finish it. Then he looks closer. He sees a man in the cockpit, bareheaded, blood on his face, struggling to keep the aircraft level. He sees another crewman tending a wounded pilot. He sees no defensive fire, no attempt to fight back, just survival. For a moment, the war seems to pause between heartbeats. Stigler does not fire.
Franz Stigler holds position off the bomber's left wing, so close the slipstream from the B-17 buffets his Messerschmitt. He can see everything now. The torn skin of the fuselage, the blackened streaks where cannon shells have chewed through aluminum, the tail half gone, the rear guns hanging uselessly, their barrels twisted like broken fingers. Inside, the Americans stare back at him. For a split second, Brown thinks this is the end. The German fighter slides into perfect firing position, so close he could reach out and touch it. Brown's mouth goes dry. He waits for the hammering impact of 20mm shells, the flash, the fire. Nothing happens. Instead, the fighter eases closer. Brown locks eyes with the German pilot. He sees a young man's face behind the goggles, calm, focused, and unmistakably human. Not a faceless enemy, not a silhouette in a gun sight. Stigler's finger rests on the trigger. One squeeze and the bomber would break apart. His radio crackles with excited German voices, other pilots calling kills, controllers urging them to finish off stragglers. This B-17 is already written off. No one would question it. But Stigler doesn't see a target. He sees men who are already beaten. In North Africa, he had seen wrecked bombers on the ground, bodies burned, crews shot as they tried to crawl free, and he had made a promise to himself that day. This would be murder. Stigler rocks his wings slightly, trying to signal the Americans. Brown doesn't understand. All he knows is the fighter isn't firing. Around him, his crew braces for impact that never comes. In the waist section, Sergeant Red Morgan stares through a jagged hole in the fuselage, frozen in disbelief. "Why isn't he shooting?" someone shouts over the intercom. Stigler pulls closer, lining up on the bomber's nose. He can see straight into the cockpit. He raises one hand and gestures, pointing forward, then down. "Land! Put it down!" Brown shakes his head. The controls are barely responding. The bomber won't make it to a German airfield even if he wanted to, and he knows the rules. If they land here, they become prisoners, if they survive the landing at all. Stigler tries again, more urgently, motioning toward the ground. Brown finally understands something else. The German is trying to help. The realization is so shocking, it almost breaks his concentration. In all his training, all his briefings, there was no scenario for this. German fighters do not escort bombers. They do not spare crews. Yet here one is, flying wingtip to wingtip. Brown points west, toward the North Sea, toward home. Stigler hesitates. If he lets them go, he risks court-martial, execution even. Pilots have been shot for less. The Luftwaffe does not tolerate disobedience, especially not mercy toward the enemy. But if he fires now, those men will die for no reason at all. He makes his decision. Stigler slides his Messerschmitt into a precise escort position, matching speed, matching altitude. Other German fighters pass at a distance, see the Bf-109 alongside the bomber, and assume the kill is already claimed or under control. No one challenges it. Flak batteries below open up, black bursts climbing toward the lone bomber. Stigler swears and moves again, placing his fighter between the ground fire and the B-17.
The bursts now detonate around him instead. Shrapnel rattles against his wings. Inside Ye Old Pub, the crew watches in stunned silence as the German fighter shields them from his own country's guns. Minutes stretch into eternity. The bomber limps westward, losing altitude, every mile a gamble. Frostbite numbs Brown's face. The wounded moan softly. Fuel gauges creep toward empty. At the coastline, Stigler flies even closer. He wants to be absolutely certain they reach the sea. The gray water spreads beneath them, rough and unforgiving, but neutral. This is as far as he can go. Stigler edges ahead, then banks slightly away. Before leaving, he does something no American crewman ever forgets. He snaps his aircraft into a sharp, formal salute. Inside the bomber, men who minutes ago were certain of death stare back, some openly crying. Brown raises his hand in return, a clumsy, instinctive gesture of thanks. Stigler pulls his Messerschmitt into a climbing turn and disappears back toward Germany. Ye Old Pub drifts alone over the North Sea, damaged, bleeding fuel, but alive. Charlie Brown exhales for what feels like the first time in hours. None of them know his name. None of them know why he spared them. But every man aboard knows one thing with absolute certainty. They are alive because a German ace chose not to kill them.
The Messerschmitt vanishes into the haze, and with it the last trace of protection. Over the North Sea, the world becomes suddenly, terrifyingly empty. No fighters, no flak, just cold wind, gray water, and a bomber that should not still be flying. Charlie Brown forces his eyes back to the instruments. The altimeter is unwinding. Airspeed is marginal. One engine is out completely, another coughing, the remaining two running hot. The control column feels loose in his hands, as if the airplane itself is giving up. "Anybody got guns?" he asks over the intercom. Silence answers him. Then a weak voice. "Tail's gone, Lieutenant." Another. "Ball turret's dead." The fortress that was designed to fight its way through enemy skies is now defenseless. Brown looks at Sandy Euchness, the co-pilot, slumped in his seat, face pale beneath dried blood. Euchness forces a thumbs up, then winces. He shouldn't even be conscious. Below them, the North Sea rolls like cold iron. If the bomber goes down here, survival is measured in minutes. Brown trims what little control he has left and eases the nose down, trading altitude for airspeed. The B-17 shudders, but steadies. It is an ugly, wounded flight, but it is flight. In the waist, Red Morgan tears off a piece of his flight jack and presses it against a wounded crewman's leg. Fingers are numb. Blood freezes where it spills. No one complains. Everyone works. Time stretches. The engines drone on, a fragile promise that could break at any second. Then, land. A faint line on the horizon. England. Brown blinks hard, not trusting his eyes. The coastline sharpens, cliffs resolving through the haze. Radio silence still grips the aircraft, but it doesn't matter anymore. They don't need clearance. They just need ground. As they cross the coast, British anti-aircraft crews track the bomber, fingers hovering over triggers. The aircraft looks wrong, ragged, alone, drifting in from enemy territory. But someone hesitates. Someone waits. The bomber continues inland. Brown searches for a place to put it down. He spots RAF Seething, a bomber base in Norfolk. He lowers what remains of the landing gear. One wheel locks, the other doesn't respond. "No go around," Brown mutters. "This is it." He lines up, fighting the controls all the way in. The B-17 touches down hard, skids, lurches sideways, metal shrieks, a wing dips, then holds. Finally, the bomber shudders to a stop in a cloud of smoke and dust. For a heartbeat,
No one moves. Then the cockpit door bursts open. Ground crews sprint toward the aircraft, stopping short as they take in the damage. They count holes. They stare at the tail, what's left of it. The crew starts climbing out, some helped, some carried. Medics rush in. Brown drops to the ground, legs shaking so badly he can barely stand. An RAF officer looks up at the airplane, then back at Brown. "How in God's name did you make it back?" Brown doesn't answer right away. He looks east, back toward the gray line of the sea, and beyond it, Germany. "A German fighter escorted us out," he finally says. The officer laughs once, sharp and disbelieving. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking, sir." No one believes him, not fully. They chalk it up to shock, to trauma, to a mind trying to make sense of survival where survival made no sense at all. The crew is shipped back to their base. Ye Old Pub will never fly again. The mission is logged. Casualties are counted. Paperwork moves on. But Charlie Brown cannot. That night, lying on a narrow cot, the image of the German pilot returns again and again. The steady wing, the hand gesture, the salute. He knows with absolute certainty that he looked death in the face and was waved past it. Across the sea, Franz Stigler lands at Yavor and taxis in, heart pounding harder than it ever did in combat. Mechanics wave him forward. Officers approach. He shuts down the engine, removes his helmet. No one asks him anything. No one noticed. He is alone with what he has done. For the rest of the war, Stigler will not speak of it. He will continue to fly. He will survive. And the memory of a shattered bomber limping toward the sea will follow him long after the guns fall silent. Years pass. The war ends. Germany lies in ruins. America celebrates victory. And two men, one American, one German, carry the same unanswered question into peacetime. Who was he?
Years after the war, Charlie Brown still wakes some nights with the sound of engines in his ears. Not the roar of combat, but the steady, impossible hum of a bomber that refused to fall. Civilian life comes to him the way it does to many veterans, quietly, awkwardly, with the war always just beneath the surface. He marries, he works, he builds a life. But the German pilot never leaves his mind. At reunions, when the men of the 397th Bomb Group trade stories, Brown tells his. At first, it's met with polite smiles, then with skepticism. German aces don't escort bombers. They don't shield enemies from flak. They don't salute and let them go. But Brown knows what he saw. In the late 1980s, more than 40 years after that December morning, Brown decides he has waited long enough. He is no longer a young lieutenant trying to survive his first mission. He is a grown man with time running shorter than it once did. If the German pilot is alive, Brown wants to find him. He writes letters. He contacts the U.S. Air Force Historical Research Agency. He reaches out to Luftwaffe veterans groups. His message is simple, repeated again and again. I am looking for the German fighter pilot who spared my crew on December 20th, 1943, over Germany. Months pass, then years. Most replies are dead ends, records lost, men deceased, memories blurred by time. Then, in 1990, a letter arrives. It is from Franz Stigler. Stigler has moved to Canada after the war. He has built a quiet life, far from Germany, far from uniforms and medals. When he reads Brown's letter, his hands shake. He knows immediately what it refers to. He has never forgotten the date, or the bomber, or the faces in the cockpit. He writes back,
He describes the shattered B-17, the wounded men, the moment he chose not to fire, the salute, the fear, not of the Americans, but of what his own side would do if they knew. Brown reads the letter in silence, then he sits down. The room feels suddenly small. Every detail matches. The search is over. They arrange to meet. In 1990, at a gathering of World War II veterans in Florida, Charlie Brown waits in a crowded hall. He is nervous in a way combat never made him. Then he sees a man walking toward him. Tall, white-haired, eyes still sharp. They stop a few feet apart. For a moment, neither speaks. Then Brown steps forward and embraces him. "You saved my life," Brown says. Stigler shakes his head. "No, I did not shoot you." From that moment on, the two men are inseparable. They talk for hours, then days. They compare memories. They fill in the gaps of a story neither ever fully understood alone. Brown introduces Stigler to his family, not as a former enemy, but as a friend, a brother. At reunions, the sight of an American bomber pilot laughing with a former Luftwaffe ace confounds and moves everyone who sees it. Stigler finally tells the full truth, how close he came to firing, how the rules of war and the words of his commander stayed his hand, how he flew escort not to help the enemy, but to remain human. Brown listens and understands something new. That day in the sky, two men had made a choice. One chose mercy. The other chose to live with it.
From that first meeting, Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler do not drift apart. They move closer, bound by something that feels older than friendship and deeper than shared memory. They call each other regularly. They visit each other's homes. When Brown speaks at events, Stigler is often beside him. People struggle to understand it. "How can you be friends with the man who tried to kill you?" they ask Brown. Brown always gives the same answer. He didn't. Stigler, for his part, is finally able to unburden himself. For nearly half a century, he had carried the moment alone, never certain if he had done the right thing or if the men he spared even survived. Now he knows. Not only did they live, they built lives, families, futures. At one reunion, Brown introduces Stigler to the surviving members of Ye Olde Pub. Men who once stared down the barrels of his guns now shake his hand, pull him into hugs, clap him on the back. One by one, they thank him. Some cry openly. Stigler, who flew dozens of combat missions without flinching, cannot speak. The story begins to spread beyond reunion halls. Newspapers pick it up. Historians verify the mission records. The dates align. The damage reports Stigler's account perfectly. What once sounded impossible is now undeniable. A German ace had saved 9 Americans. When asked why he did it, Stigler never romanticizes his decision. He doesn't call it heroism. He doesn't talk about peace or politics. "I saw men," he says simply, "not enemies." Brown and Stigler start appearing together at schools and memorials. They stand side by side, former enemies in different uniforms, telling young audiences about war not as a story of glory, but of choices. Brown talks about fear, about how close death really was. Stigler talks about restraint, about how easy it is to cross a line once humanity is gone. Their message is quiet, but powerful. As the years pass, age slows both of them. Their hair turns white, steps become careful, but the bond does not weaken. When Charlie Brown passes away in 2008, Franz Stigler mourns him, not as a former adversary, but as family. "He was my brother, not by blood, but by life."
2 years later, in 2010, Franz Stigler follows him. By then, their story has become something more than a wartime anecdote. It is taught in military ethics courses, shared in documentaries, passed down as proof that even in the most mechanized, brutal war in history, a single man's decision can defy everything around him. High above Germany, at 25,000 feet, a German ace once chose not to fire. Because of that choice, 9 Americans went home, and one of them found a brother for life. Long after both men are gone, the image remains fixed in history. A German fighter sliding alongside a shattered American bomber, not to destroy it, but to protect it. Military historians often analyze that moment in terms of rules of engagement, codes of honor, or the unwritten ethics of air combat. But for the men who lived it, the meaning was simpler and heavier. For Charlie Brown, the salute was the moment the war broke apart. He would later say that until that instant, everything in the sky had been mechanical. Targets, altitude, airspeed, survival. The salute was human. It shattered the illusion that the enemy was something less than himself. For Franz Stigler, the salute was a farewell he never expected to explain. He knew the risk he was taking. If another German pilot had seen clearly what was happening, if anyone had asked the wrong question, his career would have ended instantly, possibly his life. Yet when he lifted his hand in that cockpit, the decision was already irreversible. The salute wasn't for the Americans, it was for himself. Decades later, when interviewed, Stigler was asked whether he regretted it. He paused for a long time before answering. "If I had shot them down," he said, "I would not be able to live with myself." That statement alone explains why the story endures. World War II produced millions of moments of violence. This was a moment of restraint, and restraint is harder to explain, harder to teach, and far rarer to remember. At bomber reunions, veterans often spoke about luck, how survival sometimes came down to chance. Brown always corrected them. It wasn't luck, he would say, it was a choice. A choice made in seconds, with the pressure of doctrine, duty, and death pressing down from all sides. Today, ye olde pub exists only in photographs and maintenance logs. The Bf-109 Stigler flew is long gone, but the space between them, that narrow strip of sky where one man decided not to pull a trigger, has become part of aviation legend. Not because it was spectacular, but because it was human. Wars are usually remembered by numbers. Casualties, sorties flown, tons of bombs dropped, names carved into stone. But every so often, a story survives not because of how many people died, but because of how many didn't. On December 20th, 1943, the machinery of war worked exactly as it was designed to. Fighters intercepted bombers, flak tore at aluminum, a damaged aircraft fell behind, isolated and doomed. And yet, 9 men lived. They lived to return home, to fall in love, to raise families, to grow old telling stories that sounded impossible even to themselves, all because one pilot refused to become the thing the war demanded of him in that moment. Charlie Brown spent the rest of his life insisting that Franz Stigler was not a hero in the traditional sense. Heroes, Brown said, are what you see in movies. What Stigler did, he argued, was harder. He remained human when it cost him everything. Stigler never disagreed, but he never accepted praise either. He believed that what he did should not be remarkable, that the true tragedy was how rare such moments were. When they stood together in front of audiences, the contrast was striking. One wore the legacy of the U.S. Army Air Forces, the other carried the weight of the Luftwaffe. Two uniforms once sworn to destroy each other, now sharing the same story. When asked what message they wanted people to take from it, neither spoke about politics or victory. They spoke about choice, about how even in the worst conditions imaginable, a single decision can echo across decades, about how enemies are often separated by orders, not humanity, about how a brother can be found in the unlikeliest place, 25,000 feet above a country at war. The war ended, the sky fell silent, but the salute endured. Because in that brief moment over Germany, the war did not win. A man did.